So what'd I miss? Nothing? Cool, great, then we can jump right back into it. Hey everyone, and welcome to the very first brand new comic class that we have done in a month. I know that this is the show that most of my followers look forward to every single week, so I apologize for being gone for an entire month. But hey man, nothing can stop Thorgy Ween. Man, I'm looking forward to not having to say that for another 11 months. So yeah, today on Comic Class, I decided that we were going to take a look at the Marvel Knights 20th anniversary. I wanted to look at this for a couple of reasons, one of which is because I was a huge fan of Marvel Knights when it first came out 20 years ago. That was one of the biggest lines that Marvel ever launched, and even though it hasn't actually been an official line for many years now, it has continued to influence pretty much a giant corner of the Marvel Universe, because Marvel always had their noirish characters, their characters who dealt with more real-world issues, their characters who were the street-level heroes. However, Marvel Knights was when they came in here and said, let's actually, focus on that. Let's come in here and plant our flag down and say, no, we are making it official. We were putting a ring on the street-level heroes here, and we were saying this is actually a thing that defines the Marvel Universe, and here is its own entire corner over here where we can just go nuts and just fully explore these darker, more serious, down-to-earth storylines. And it wasn't just books like Daredevil or The Punisher that were getting these titles, although oddly enough, when Marvel Knights first launched and they created a Punisher book, the Punisher was dead at the time. So he came back to life as an angel with weird magic guns. Yeah, never look into that ever again. Just ignore that was a thing. It seems like every 10 years they decide to kill off Frank Castle, and then they're like, alright, well let's bring him back to life somehow. I don't know, he's an angel, he's a Frankenstein monster now, just have Punisher be the Punisher. That's kind of all you gotta do with this guy. But yeah, it wasn't just the street level heroes they were doing this with. They also put out there the Inhumans, and that was actually the title that got a lot of people interested in the Inhumans. That's actually the book that got me to be an Inhumans fan. The Paul Jenkins Inhumans run was amazing. And again, the Inhumans are not a street level vigilante. It is this big royal family of superpowered individuals living out in space. But it took them and made them more realistic. It took them and add a lot more of that down-to-earth flavor, which kind of defines the Marvel Universe. I've always said that the thing that defines Marvel is that they're the real world, but with that dash of the fantastic in there. And that, again, was one of the major selling points of the Marvel Knights line. And the Marvel Knights line did so insanely well, they kept expanding it and expanding it. They even started grabbing certain heroes and characters who were not part of the Marvel Knights line. They were firmly cemented in their own corner of the Marvel Universe, and they said, yeah, but wouldn't it work pretty well if they were part of the Marvel Knights? Like Wolverine had been in the X-Men line forever, and they were like, yeah, but you're really gritty, and you're down to earth, and kind of realistic, and you're also very brutal and kind of dark, so we're just gonna grab your title up and drop you in Marvel Knights. They also did that with the Hulk. The Hulk for many years was a Marvel Knights character, which you think of the Hulk, you think of like the Avengers, but no, they went, yeah, he is a grizzled character who is haunted by his own nightmares and must constantly just walk the earth and be tormented by his own inner demons. That is a darker title. Pick you up, drop you in Marvel Knights. That's how big Marvel Knights was. In fact, Marvel Knights got so big that there came a point in which almost every character out there started getting a Marvel Knights line. Like Captain America got picked up and dropped into Marvel Knights because they're like, all right, yeah, we can do some really darker like espionage stories with you. We can do some really political real world stories with you and drop you into Marvel Knights. But you know, Wolverine and Hulk, those guys make sense. Captain America, you can totally see, all right, you want a line that deals with more real world issues? Captain America has always dealt with political real world issues in his style, so that makes sense as well. Spider-Man, okay, Spider-Man's more jokey, but you know, he is a street level vigilante, so it does make sense to give him a Marvel Knight style. But then they even gave the Fantastic Four a Marvel Knight style. The Fantastic Four, the most crazy Jack Kirby's-ish style superhero team out there, that if there is any team at Marvel that deals mostly with big outer space issues and not really the down-to-earth real-world stuff, it's the Fantastic Four, and yet this was the first time that I can remember that Marvel's first family, kind of a big deal for them, actually had two ongoing titles at the same time, because they kept the regular Fantastic Four title over there, and then they gave them a Marvel Knights Fantastic Four title. It was insane seeing how many of these books they wanted to put out there, and yet I really love the Fantastic Four Marvel Knights book because, again, it kind of took more of a down-to-earth, real-world look at the Fantastic Four. It focused more on the family element, which was always the most realistic thing about the Fantastic Four. So, yeah, it was amazing for this long stretch of time seeing all these Marvel superheroes get a very different perspective on them. It was great to watch these creators really try brand new stuff with them, or with characters like the Punisher and Daredevil, watching these creators come in here and go, yeah, but let's lean even harder into the stuff that define these characters. And as I said, the Marvel Knights line, it did eventually come to an end, but it didn't come to an end because the people at Marvel were like, well, do we really want to keep making these darker, more realistic storylines in there? That's we don't really want that to define us anymore. No, it came to an end because they looked at that and just said, do we really need to keep shoving it into its own little corner over there? Can't we just have it be part of the regular Marvel universe? Because if you look at like Charles Soule's Daredevil run, that's still totally a Marvel Knights book. Hell, if you look at like, say, the Matt Fraction Hawkeye series, that was 100% a Marvel Knights book. They just didn't call it Marvel Knights anymore. They just didn't put the Marvel Knights imprint up there anymore. And I'm kind of torn on that because on the one hand, I think it's pretty cool that just the entire Marvel Universe has all these tones. But at the same time, I've said many times before, I think that by creating these imprints to let audiences know, hey, this is what this book is going to be about, kind of does help readers understand what these books, will be about. It helps them understand what titles they might be interested in. So yeah, I don't really know about them just giving up on the Marvel Knights line. However, today, the Marvel Knights 20th anniversary special came out, and I was looking forward to that because, as I said, I was a big fan of the Marvel Knights line, but I was also looking forward to it because Donny Cates was writing it. And if you guys have watched this channel for a while, I have been talking about Donny Cates since forever. That dude has blown up at Marvel, and I am so proud of him. I'm so happy that everybody is learning about the magic of Donny Cates, because I have been talking about that guy since he was doing super tiny indie books over at Heavy Metal. Hell, I was talking about him back when he was still at Dark Horse, before he even went over to Heavy Metal. I have been a fan of Donny Cates since day one, and I am not saying that to be like a hipster, like, I liked this guy before he was big. No, I don't care about coming in here and trying to show my credentials. I'm coming in here and just saying, I've been rooting this guy on. So it makes me feel so good to see this guy actually succeeding, and it makes me feel so good to see Marvel giving him these bigger projects. But at the same time, Marvel Knights, as I said, it was always the smaller, down-to-earth stuff. It was the more realistic look at the superheroes. It was the darker, grittier tones. And Donny Cates has proven he can do dark and gritty. He's absolutely proven that. He's got a book about redneck vampires out there. He's got a book about this guy down in Texas who gets the powers of a god. Which is actually being turned into a movie. And good for Donny Cates. Clap emoji. I am proud to see him on this book because he can do those darker tones, but he also does really weird twists on stuff. This guy can get crazy with the titles he's working on, and as I said, Marvel Knights, kind of known for being more realistic, not really the big sensational stuff. So it felt like an odd fit for me. Personally, I would have liked to have seen like Matthew Rosenberg on this title more. The stuff that he did over at Black Mask with his darker, more realistic, down-to-earth stuff over there, I think that would have been a better fit for this. Also, he's been working on The Punisher, and he's been doing an amazing job on The Punisher over there. But again, you guys know me, massive Donny Cates fan. It's just kind of odd that he's the one that they picked for this. So I went into this a little bit not cautious, because as I said, I trust Donny Cates. Just kind of confused and curious as to what this could possibly be. And what we got, it was, the darker, grittier tone that you would expect from a Marvel Knights book. But it was also weird. This was a weird book. You want to know how weird this was? I read this and Grant Morrison's new Green Lantern book today, and this was the weirder of the two of them. This was weirder than a Grant Morrison Green Lantern book. By the way, for anybody who's wondering why I'm not reviewing the Grant Morrison Green Lantern book, quick 30-second review here. It's alright. It's, it's a very basic Hal Jordan book. It's setting up some stuff, and Grant Morrison is typically one of those guys who, in the beginning, doesn't do anything that spectacular, but towards the end you're like, oh my goodness, that's all the stuff he was building up towards. So, it's kind of a wait and see for now, but it's fine. It's not bad. It's pretty decent. Review over. So what is the Marvel Knights 20th anniversary book all about? Well, it starts off with Matt Murdock in a cemetery at Karen Page's grave. But he doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know who Karen Page is. He doesn't really know anything. He doesn't know why he can't see, but he can also kind of see at the same time. He doesn't have any idea how he got there. He is just completely a blank slate. But then this cop comes up to him, and the cop is Frank Castle. Frank Castle says, yeah, listen, you're Daredevil. By the way, I don't know who Daredevil is or what that means. All I know is that I woke up and had no idea who I was, and someone had to come and tell me, and I kind of awoke and started to learn who I was, and they told me I had to come here and find you here and tell you who you were. And yeah, it's basically revealed as you read through this story, someone has made everyone on Earth forget who these superheroes are, including the heroes themselves. Nobody remembers that superheroes existed. Nobody remembers that they had powers. Nobody remembers the costumes or the fights or the villains or any of that. And it's a very weird setup. But as I said, I was kind of expecting something weird with Donny Cates. But I kind of understand what they're doing here. Because as I said, Marvel Knights was all about the more real-world look at these heroes. The darker, grittier, real-world look. And yeah, they basically just went, well, let's just take everybody's superhero identities out of this. Just nobody is a superhero anymore. Just bam. No superheroes, no nothing. So it's very real-world. Just instantly, it's basically, hey, what if someone took the Marvel Universe and made it the most Marvel Knights-y version of Marvel Knights that you could possibly imagine? It's a very odd idea, and I keep looking at like, well, that's kind of the perfect thing to do to celebrate the Marvel Knights 20th anniversary, is that you turn the entire Marvel Universe into the most Marvel Knights version of the Marvel Knights, but at the same time, it's not exactly that much of like a celebration of Marvel Knights. It's not really looking back at everything that made Marvel Knights special, at all the titles that we remember, at all the characters that we remember, at all the storylines that we remember. It's kind of its own original concept. And I've been looking at a lot of the reviews around the internet about this book, and most people's reviews are kind of in the middle on this. And I've read a couple of the reviews, and many of them are like, well, it's a really fascinating idea, but it doesn't make me think of Marvel Knights. And that's kind of where I am as well, because I did really enjoy this book. This storyline is actually great. And if it was completely its own thing, I would be coming in here and just applying like, oh man, this is going to be its own standalone Daredevil storyline. We're going to also get a bunch of other characters in there like Elektra and the Punisher, several other street level heroes, but it's mainly going to focus on Daredevil. And yeah, it's this great original thing, and I can't applaud this enough. But when it's supposed to be that thing that represents the Marvel Knights and their 20th anniversary spectacular, it doesn't quite feel like that to me. Because, again, I get the idea behind this. I get that Marvel Knights was the darker real-world version of the Marvel Universe. And this is taking all the Marvel superheroes and just making them 100% real-world because there's no superpowers or secret identities or anything. I understand that. It's just odd. It just kind of feels like, well, maybe you went just a little bit too far into the real-world territory there, where they no longer have any of that touch of the fantastic that kind of also define the Marvel Knights. I've been coming in here this whole time and saying, yeah, it's the Marvel Universe, but it's darker and more real-world. But it was still the Marvel Universe. And this felt just so odd for it to be the thing saying, this is the representation of Marvel Knights. Kind of, I guess. I mean, it's definitely a side of Marvel Knights. I get that. However, as the storyline goes along, you start to see that Karen Page actually is going to play a larger role in this. And I don't mean like she's coming back from the dead or anything. I mean more of like her memory is going to play a role in this. And again, that's definitely a celebration of Marvel Knights. Because Kevin Smith's Daredevil run was one of the things that kicked off Marvel Knights. And in his run, he had Bullseye kill off Karen Page. So the idea that Daredevil, he's trying to regain his memories, and the one thing he's holding on to is his memory of Karen Page, it's like, oh, that actually is a really good callback to the thing that kicked off Marvel Knights. That's actually kind of genius. But it really feels like you have this way bigger storyline here that feels like kind of completely separate from anything Marvel Knights related. But again, I can see how it's tying back into Marvel Knights because you've got all the heroes. As I said, all the heroes. You see the Fantastic Four pop up in one point, and they have zero memory of being the Fantastic Four. They're just a normal family. That's all they are. So it's pretty much only the street level characters in here who are regaining their memories. Daredevil regained his memory. The Punisher says, yeah, I don't really remember much, but little bits and pieces are coming back to me. And the guy who is awakening these heroes, he is a character who was a Marvel Knight. So I look at that and go, yeah, okay, I see it. I see that this is going to be this big, giant, massive, horrifying event. But it's going to be the little, gritty, street-level guys. Those are the guys who are going to have to step up, and they're going to have to be the heroes. So it's like, okay, so that kind of is a celebration of the Marvel Knights. But I'm going to have to wait and see how it plays out in future issues. I'm going to have to wait and see what becomes of all these heroes. I'm going to have to wait and see like how they come together, where the storyline goes from there. Because issue number 1, it feels very separate from Marvel Knights. Even though I can see how it's supposed to be a celebration of Marvel Knights, it does kind of feel more like its own storyline. It feels more of like an original idea that they had for a great storyline, and now they're just kind of slapping the Marvel Knights label on there. But at the very end of this, you see the cover for issue number 2, and it's Elektra fighting the Punisher. Okay, those were 2 big Marvel Knights characters, so they're going to be the center focus of the next issue. So maybe after that, we get even more Marvel Knights characters coming in here, even more of the street-level heroes coming in here to have to save the day. So, yeah, this absolutely could end up becoming a great celebration of Marvel Knights. But issue number 1, it feels more of like just its own really interesting storyline that just happens to star Marvel Knights characters, if that makes any sense. Wow, I'm back at comic class for 1 episode, and I'm already rambling like a madman here. Did any of what I just said make sense? You want to know a good way to sum up my view on this book? It comes at the very end of it, and I'm not going to spoil anything because I did really like this book, and I do think that it is worth checking out. But a good way to sum up my view on is that at the end of it, it looks like the Kingpin is going to be the big villain of this thing. And hey man, you want a villain for the big Marvel Knights celebration? The Kingpin is the guy to go with. That is absolutely who should be the villain of this whole thing. But then, and again, I'm not going to say who it is because I'm not going to spoil it, but it's revealed that the Kingpin is not the big villain of this whole event. He's actually working for a guy, and that guy is going to be the big villain of this entire event. And I looked at that villain and I said, that is awesome. I cannot wait to see how this villain is going to play out in this entire storyline, how our heroes are going to have to go up against this big villain, what his big master plan is. Oh man, I am excited for this. But it's not the villain that I would expect to find in a Marvel Knights book. He feels too big for all of this. He feels kind of more like on the big, giant, in-your-face, A-class heroes type of book. Giant, cosmic level almost kind of character. And I look at him and it's like, he is absolutely a great villain for this storyline that you're building. But he's not a great Marvel Knights villain, if that makes any sense. And that's kind of how I feel about this entire first issue. I can certainly look at parts of this book, like the whole, they're making it super down-to-earth and real-world thing. Like, okay, well, that's very Marvel Knights is in there. Okay, it's all the street-level heroes who are going to have to come in here and save the day. That's very Marvel Knights-ish. But the scale of this thing and just the giant and just the scope of it all, it doesn't feel Marvel Knights to me. It feels more like it just happens to be a giant, massive event that happens to feature Marvel Knights characters. But if you look at it that way, if you just told me, hey, this has nothing to do with Marvel Knights, it's just kind of like its own standalone thing, I'd be 100% down with this thing. Like, me looking at this thing objectively, like just coming in here and just saying, just ignore whether or not this had anything to do with Marvel Knights 20th anniversary. Like, take that off the cover completely and just treat it as its own storyline. I would love this thing. I would be incredibly excited about this thing. But, you know, you put Marvel Knights 20th anniversary there on the cover, and you look at it, it's like, this doesn't really feel like Marvel Knights. I mean, yeah, down to earth, real world, street level vigilantes, tying back to Karen Page, that's great. But still, just the premise of it and the scale of it and basically the big reveal at the end, it feels so much bigger than what Marvel Knights was. So, in the end, if you were really looking forward to this because you want a celebration of Marvel Knights, you're kind of going to get it. Sort of, kind of. But if you don't care at all about Marvel Knights, I mean, this is the 20th anniversary. I've got a lot of followers out there who weren't even alive when Marvel Knights started, so it means nothing to you guys. For you people out there who just want a darn good storyline, I'm really excited for where this book is going to go. I had a really fun time with it. I thought it was great. So yeah, that's kind of my two different viewpoints on it. How much enjoyment you're going to get out of this all kind of depends on how dedicated you were to this just being a celebration of that thing that you read 20 years ago. And understandably so. I mean, it is called the Marvel Knights 20th anniversary event. So yeah, understandable. But I feel like that kind of is what you need to think about when you go into this book. But thank you guys very much. Let me know what you thought about this book down in the comments below, or let me know what were some of your favorite Marvel Knights books when you first started reading those titles. Let me know all that and more in the comments down below, or on Twitter, Twitch, and Tumblr at Professor Thorgy. We are now officially back. Our month-long Halloween celebration is over with, so we will have a brand new episode of Comic Class next week, so make sure that you hit that subscribe button in order to stay tuned for that. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Come back next week. Bye.